phones, turn them off, put them away, sit up in your seats, and let me be the first. Well, I guess I wouldn't be the first because Zeth already said, but Happy New Year. Happy New Year. We made it. We made it through all of the crazy chaos that was 2020, and barely, right? And I'm sorry how things ended in 2020. Like, we had things and we didn't have things, and then there was a big outbreak in Altoona with all the COVID stuff, and then we had to cancel, then we had to do Zoom, then we had to cancel again. But we are back, and we are planning on staying back together. We don't want to go back to Zoom at all. Like my man said, that like we're done with Zoom, and you guys probably are. But for those of you that are new, or maybe you haven't been here for a while, when we kicked off this year for Refuge, we jumped into the series of Genesis. And we have been in this amazing series looking at how Jesus is shown through the very beginning of the story of Genesis. And Genesis is the first book of the Bible. We opened up with Adam and Eve, and we talked about Adam and Eve, and we talked about sin and God's forgiveness. We talked about Cain and Abel, and we talked about them being brothers. We talked about Noah, and we talked about how God has a plan and a promise for all of us, and we were always part of the plan, and we are part of the promise. So we had that, which was absolutely amazing. And then we talked about Abraham, and we talked about all this journey that God is taking him on. And tonight, we're going to jump right back in. I don't want us to miss a beat in this message of jumping back in to talk about Abram and Sarai and this journey that they are on to get where they need to get to. But before we get into that, I'm still kind of blown away that Christmas is gone already. How many of you love Christmas? All right, put your hands. All right, let's just be real tonight. How many of you like getting presents in Christmas? I ain't gonna lie. I'm a 34-year-old grown man, and I like presents. Okay, I will tell you, I still get excited. Like, when it's time to go to bed, I like wrap up in my blanket, and I'm like, oh yeah, tomorrow's Christmas. Because I get so excited because there's something about the anticipation of what you're gonna get. And sometimes you ask for things for Christmas and you get them. And sometimes, and then sometimes your parents like, what is the one gift that you want? And like, maybe you knew they got it for you. Or maybe you snuck and saw it. How many of you go through the house and look for Christmas presents before Christmas? Yeah, I know. I know who you are. I don't even got to ask. And you find out one thing that you wanted. And see, sometimes when we want something so bad, we have a great anticipation and we're waiting on it because we want it like right now. Especially when you know something's coming out. Like the new Xbox, the new iPhone, the new PlayStation. Whatever it might be, whatever it is, the concert that you can't wait to get to, the movie you can't wait to see, or the new taco coming to Taco Bell. Listen, we love food around here. But we get excited. And there's this anticipation of you wanting something to happen and you knowing that it can happen. And it's not just that. We do it in life. Like, think about this. Think about on Black Friday when people used to go shopping and they would wait in long lines. Or think about when the new item, the new iPhone is coming, people will legit camp out in front of Best Buy. When Chick-fil-A opened in Altoona, that parking lot was crazy full. There was people in tents waiting to be the first in so they could get a free chicken sandwich for a year. Now, I wasn't in that line, but I went to observe that line. But it was too long, and I was like, I'm not doing this. I'll be honest. But you got to think about why, because there's anticipation of what's going to happen and what's coming. And we wait for that, Or you go to the amusement park. How many of you love roller coasters? I love roller coasters. Love them. And so you will stand in line. You will stand in line for an hour and a half to ride a 15 to 20 second roller coaster sometimes. Like, you get to the front and they'll be like, you will be back here in 10 seconds. And you're like, I waited 2 hours. But as you're waiting, you're looking and you're seeing the speed of the coaster. You're seeing the height of the drops. You're seeing all the loops and corkscrews and all those things. And you get excited. There's something inside of you that is excited about what is going to happen. And can I just be honest? Do you know what the worst part of waiting is? Waiting. That's the worst part, especially when you know you're going to get something good. Especially when you know I'm going to get something real good, but you have to wait for it. And sometimes we do not like to wait for things. We're a little impatient sometimes, especially when we know what we're going to get is good. We're like, I'm going to get something real good, and you're like, well, you got to wait. Are you kidding me right now? I have to wait for that? I mean, to us, fast food isn't fast enough. We get hungry. Some of us get hangry. And you want your food now. And if you don't get your food, you're going to stab somebody in the eye. Because that's just legit. Like, you get really hungry for something. But there's something about waiting. We just don't like the waiting process. And in the waiting, it's not easy. We want what we want now. And when we're waiting for something and we know that it's coming, it's even harder for us to wait. And sometimes we get so desperate that we go and we peek at the gifts before we should have them. Or we go and try to do something else. So has this ever happened to you? You get home from school or you get home from practice and you're mad hungry. So you just start eating anything that you can find. But your mom or your dad or your grandma or grandpa are like, don't eat too much because we have a good dinner that I've been working on and I'm going to cook. But yet you still are pounding the Doritos. You're pounding the Cheetos. You're in there like you got yogurt and you're just like squirting it in your face. And what you do is you end up spoiling your appetite for the main meal that's coming. And then when that main meal that your mom or grandma or whoever was working on and it looks so good, you only eat a small amount. Why? Because you wasted all of your appetite on the junk food. See, sometimes as humans, what we like to do is we like to take things into our own hands to make it happen faster. You ever try to fix a problem, and when you went to fix the problem, you just made the problem a whole lot worse? You're like, I got this, and then you did it, and you're like, I don't got this. Like, this is a train wreck. I can't tell you how many times in my life where I was like, I got this covered. God, like, I got it. I'll make it happen. And I tried to make it happen, and it just fell apart. Why? Because I wasn't willing to wait for the promise that God had for me. And so many of us are like that. And tonight, what we're going to find out is this is exactly what's going to happen in this story tonight. And remember, we're in Genesis chapter 16. And we got this phenomenal story of Abram and Sarai and God's doing this. Now, if you remember, like when we started the Genesis series, I warned you that some of these stories are crazy. Like, in tonight's story is crazy. And it's like a Jerry Springer episode crazy. It's like HBO Max late night scary. It's like rated R scary weird. Like, you're going to listen to the story tonight and you're going to be like, what? But it's true. It's in the Bible. And so in Genesis chapter 16, we're going to find out what this story is. And when you see it, you're going to be like, this is just absolutely crazy. But what we're going to find is that a lady and a man tried to do something that they shouldn't have done, and they overstepped. Now, Sarah and Abram were promised by God that they were going to have children. And not just like a few children, a lot of children. God promised to Abraham and said, listen, your descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the sky. So there's going to be a lot of them. And you're going to have all of these descendants, and they're going to go on to do amazing things. And so if you're like married and you hear that, you're like, oh, great. I'm going to have lots of kids. I'm going to have an awesome family. I'm going to have all of this, and it's going to be wonderful. And I can't wait for it. And so this is the promise that was given to Abram and Sarai. Remember, they already moved into a place where they didn't know where they were going. They landed in this place, and then they ended up having this whole story that happened. And they're in this place, and they're like, okay, God, you promised us these things. And so we get to a point in Genesis chapter 16 where we find that they're in a place where they're tired of waiting. We have all been in a place in our life where we're tired of waiting. Like, I don't want to wait anymore. I'm done. I'm going to make it happen, whether it's the right time or not. I'm going to make it happen. So check this out in Genesis chapter 16, verses 1 through 4. Now, Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave girl named Hagar. So she said to her husband Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. So go sleep with my slave. Perhaps you can build a family through her. Abram agreed to what Sarah said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarah, his wife, took the Egyptian slave and gave the slave to her husband to be his wife. He slept with her and she conceived. All right, let me just break it down so that you can understand what is happening here. You have Sarai who's married to Abram. They're promised to have a bunch of children. Sarah's like, I'm done waiting. I'm getting too old. This isn't happening. I don't know what's going on. But God promised us children, but he has not given us any. So you know what? Take my slave girl, go sleep with her, get her pregnant, and have a family grow through her. And so she goes to her husband and says this, and Abram's like, okay. Okay, I will. So the Bible says that they went through the process. She got married. She became one of his wife, and she became pregnant because of this. This is the Bible that we're reading. This is Abram, the father of faith of all of Israel. This is Sarai, who is in this lineage of what we're going to talk next week about, of who Jesus comes through, this family. And this is how it starts. Because you got to understand that she was really wanting the immediate need. And guys, listen to me tonight. We cannot allow our immediate want to be more important than the promise of God. We can't allow the immediate want right now to be more important than what God has promised you. See, some of you already know what God has promised you. You've been walking with the Lord and you know it. As you get older, some of you are going to find out the promises that God has for you. And they're going to be amazing and they're going to be wonderful. But you can't allow the immediate want, the immediate need to rob you of something that God wants for you. But so oftentimes, this is what we do. When we attempt to take over, we tell God, like, listen, your promise, like, I get that, but I'm going to do it now. Why? Because I want it now. I want it immediately. Understand this, time will test our faith and truly believe in God. Time is going to be the ultimate test of faithfulness. How long can you wait? Can you wait for this? Can you be faithful in the waiting and say, God, I keep trusting in you and I keep believing in you that you are going to give us this promise? It's still falling in love with God and saying, I am dependent on you because of who you are, not because of what I can get. And this becomes the challenge that we see here. The real question that we have to ask is, will we trust him enough to wait on whatever it is he's promised us? Whether it's a dream, whether it's a talent, whether it's getting to a certain place in life, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a friendship, whatever it is, are we willing to wait? See, God keeps his promise to Abraham. And through the rest of Genesis, we'll talk about that through the rest of the series, how awesome this is. But the story doesn't stop here because it gets a little bit more crazier. But let me highlight what happens next. So then it goes on and says, when Hagar became pregnant with child, Sarah began to despise/hate her. Then Sarah told Abram, you are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now she knows it. She is pregnant, and she hates me. May the Lord's judgment be between you and me. All right. I know there's a lot of ladies in the house. A lot of girls here. I better watch myself. And I'm just going to be honest sometimes. I grew up with sisters. Sometimes y'all get a little crazy. All right? I'm not going to say a lot crazy, but sometimes girls get a little crazy. Like my sisters, man, they get a little crazy sometimes. And what you find in this story is Sarah got a little crazy. Because her idea, she turns around and says, oh no, this was your fault. You did this. You made this happen. And what she begins to do is she begins to blame Abram and for the decision that they made together. And she begins to hate the very idea that she came up with to make things happen. And it's so interesting how this works. Because remember, this was Sarah's idea. Well, why don't you take my slave? And why don't you get her pregnant? And why don't you start God's promised family through her? And then when she gets pregnant, what was considered a good idea then becomes hate. And she begins to hate what she wants. And she begins to blame her. She blames her husband. Why? Because that's what naturally we do when things don't go our way. Oh, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's everyone else's fault. Guys, listen, as you grow in relationship with the Lord, as you grow into a mature adult, understand that sometimes in life, it's you. It's your mistake. It's what you decide to do, and you have to live with that. And sometimes that's hard because it's easier for me to blame everybody else for my problem. But when I tried to fix the promise to be what I wanted when I messed it up. And we have to have understanding that this is exactly what happens in this story. But then I began to read this, and I'm like, okay, this story, I've heard it many times, and of all these things, of Hagar and her son and all these things. And I begin to read this, and it gets crazy because Sarah begins to hate Hagar. Hagar begins to hate her, and all of this trouble began to kind of stir up. So naturally, when we have a problem, naturally when there's trouble, what do? We run away. We run away. Because let's just be honest. it's easier to run away from my problems than it is to face them. It's easier to be like, you know what, I don't like this, like how this friendship is, so I'm going to bounce and run. I don't like how this relationship's going, so I'm just going to bounce. I don't like how this is happening at my house, so I'm just going to bounce. It's always easier to run away from our troubles. It's the easy thing to do. We all have done it. At some point, if I were to sit down and be like, you ever want to run away? You'd probably be like, yeah. I ran away from trouble. I ran away from this. I ran away from that. Because we have personalities. Like my personality, I can deal with conflict, no problem. I don't go looking for it, but I can deal with it. Some of us hate conflict and we hate having to address things. So it's easier for us just to shut down, go to our room, not talk to anyone, block everybody on Instagram, not accept any DMs, decide I'm not going to talk to anybody else, and just stay isolated because it's easier to run away. So you might not physically run away, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you run away. In this story, what ends up happening, Hagar, she runs away. So you got this girl who just got forced into this situation with Abram and Sarah, becomes pregnant. Now she feels like she would be accepted because she's pregnant, but gets rejected. So what does she do? She runs away. And you have this teenager, or this young woman who's run off into the wilderness by herself, pregnant. And that's how this story keeps going, and it's how it keeps happening. And we look at it, and you got to understand that Hagar faced an impossible problem. She was forced as a slave into this relationship. She was Sarah's slave. Then Sarah said, this is what you're going to do. Sarah and Abram lost faith in what was going on. They lost faith in God's ability to overcome Sarai's barrenness and everything like that. And they forced Hagar into this thing. Hagar gets upset and she runs. See, understand this. When the timing is not right, you will be forced to deal with the problems that you create. Sarah and Abram had to deal with this problem, and she says, this is your fault, Abraham. And Abraham says, nah, I'm out. I'm not dealing with this. So he chooses not to accept any type of thing there, and so this girl runs. She runs off. The Bible goes on to tell us kind of how this happened, and we jump around. It says that Hagar ran away from the Lord. But this is interesting because I love this passage of Scripture here specifically that we find. Because she's out, she's running, she's probably in some type of desert, and she gets to this place, and it's an oasis. And it says, the angel of the Lord meets her. Now, the angel of the Lord in reference in the Old Testament was Jesus showing up on the scene. So anytime you read about the angel of the Lord, many scholars, many people believe this is Jesus showing up. And so check out this conversation that starts in verse 11. The angel of the Lord said to her, you are now pregnant, and you're going to give birth to a son. You're going to name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your misery. This dude will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility towards all of his brothers. So verse 13, she gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. See, while on the run, the angel of the Lord found Hagar. I want you to notice that the Lord found Hagar during her desperate time of need, when she thought nobody else could see her, and she ran. Why? Because she wasn't accepted like she thought she would be. She was rejected. So in her rejection, she runs, and in her rejection and her desperation, the angel of the Lord shows up and is like, hey, I see you. I see what's going on right now. I see this situation, and I want you to know that I'm with you and I'm here. See, guys, you got to understand this about God. God desires us to draw near to him, especially when we're beat up and broken. There are times when it may feel like God has forgotten about us. We can live like that sometimes. We're like, God, you've really forgotten. And Hagar reminds us that God sees us. And Hagar reminds us that no matter how far or fast you run, your problems will still be there, but so will God. You really aren't going to outrun your problems, but you're really not going to outrun God either, because God is still going to be there. The problems will still be there, but God is there. And it's a whole lot easier to deal with the problems when God is with you than when you're by yourself. And I love the fact that we can surrender our circumstances, our situations, our thoughts to God and stop running away. And say, you know what, I'm not going to run anymore. I'm just going to give this over. And what's interesting in this passage is, so God lets Hagar know, hey, I see you. Hagar's response back to God is very interesting because she gives him a name. She names God. See, God has many different names in the Bible. He's the provider, he's the protector, he's the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning, the end, the light, he's the way, he's all of these different things. And so she actually gives God a name. And this is one of the first times where we see this in Scripture, where we see God get a name from somebody, because she said she gave this name to God who spoke over her. You are the God who sees me, for I have now seen the one who sees me. See, as Hagar is running away, the Lord meets her and tells her to go back, promising the blessings of her son, of Ishmael and all that. I don't have time to get into the whole Ishmael lineage and where it brings us today and all of that. It's really crazy. But she gives God the name, the God who sees me, which is El Roya, which means God sees me. And I begin to think about this, how this is really interesting. God sees me. God sees me. And I see God. And then I begin to think about this. This is just the way my mind works. Y'all ever play hide and seek? I'm going to tell you right now, I was a great hider when I was a kid. Great. Like, I was good. I would find that one crazy spot that you're like, nobody can get in there. I'm not even going to look in there. And I would be in there. I'd be hiding. But have you ever played hide and seek with people who, let's just be real, they just ain't good at hide and seek? Like, they're like, oh, I'm going to go hide behind this curtain over here. And they go and hide behind the curtain, and their big shoes are sticking out from underneath, and there's a big, like, block right here. And, like, the curtain's real smooth, and then a big block, and then real smooth again. And you're like, dude, you suck at hide and seek. You know what I'm talking about? Like, they're terrible at hide and seek. We've all played hide and seek with people that are bad at it. I mean, for real. Then we play hide and seek with the people that like, all right, go hide, and they don't even come find us. Like, I'm going to go watch Netflix. You guys know, you guys have been there, done that. You know exactly what I'm talking about. But I was thinking about this. Sometimes, as funny as it is to play hide and seek with people that are terrible at hide and seek, is the same way we play hide and seek with God. Because like, oh, you know what? I'm going to run over here. I'm going to hide behind this curtain, and God won't be able to see me. But yet my big old feet are sticking out, and there's a big hurdle right here when everything else is smooth. And God's literally looking at me like, really, Micah? Really? That's your hiding spot? You don't think I see you? But see, there's a reason I'm hiding. There's a reason that I'm running away. There's a reason why I'm doing it. I'm in hurt. I'm in pain. I'm in confusion. People are not accepting me. People have rejected me. People don't know all these things that are happening. And so I choose to hide. And when I'm hiding, I think that being hidden is my security, because no one can get to me when I'm hiding. You think about that. When you were a little kid, what would you do? You go and hide. Thunder starts, lightning, all that. You go in your bed. You pull the blanket over your head. You get a little ball. And you don't think anything can touch you under that blanket. It's a security. So I run and hide in my security thinking that's what I need. And God's right there. He's like, dude, I see you, and that's not what you need. You need me. I'm the one that you need in this very situation. And I was really beginning to think about that thing about hide and seek and how all that is. And I'm sure you've all been in this moment at some point in your life where something has happened to cause you to want to run from things. Zeth, will you put on some music for me? I'm sure that you guys have been in situations before where you got all this going on in your life and no one sees it. No one sees it. No one sees the hurt and the pain that you're carrying around. No one sees it and understands it. No one sees you at home when you're laying in your bed and you're weeping and your pillow is covered in tears because you're so upset and confused and frustrated with everything that has happened up to this point, but nobody sees that. Nobody sees you on your phone late at night texting your friend, pouring your heart out because you're so heartbroken, because you got so much going on and your heart is so heavy and you just need someone to talk to. No one sees that. No one sees you so angry that when you go home, you just want to punch holes in the wall and you just want to hit something because you're so frustrated because you don't understand. And no one sees that. No one sees you when you think that no one will love you, no one accepts you, so you begin to just take things out and cut yourself because you think that'll make you feel better, and you don't think anyone sees you. You don't think anyone sees you when you look in the mirror and you hate what you see and you're insecure about what you see, so you just choose not to eat. You choose to just starve yourself constantly, and you choose to find comfort in things that are not even comfortable. You choose to live a certain way where you're like, you know what, no one sees me in what I do. Listen, nobody does see you, but God does. God sees you exactly where you're at, and he knows exactly what's going on in your life. And I know this sounds weird, like, Micah, why would you kick 2021 off with a message like this? This is a messed up family. This is a messed up situation. This is so weird. Like, why would you ever want to begin the year like this? Because you got to understand that going throughout your life from this point forward, you're going to have a lot of things that are going to happen. Some are going to be your fault. Some are not going to be your fault. But whatever it is, no matter where you're at, no matter where you choose to hide, God is still going to see you. And the thing about God is he not only sees you and sees the problem that's going on, but he says, I'm going to help you fix this. I'm going to help restore this. See, what's crazy about this, remember, the promise, who is the promise to? The promise was to Abram and Sarah. I promise you that you will have a family. I promise you that you have a lineage. So you know what God does? God flips it around and says, you know what? Hey, God, this is what I'm going to promise you. I'm going to promise you that your son Ishmael, he's going to come into the world. He's going to be a wild man. He's going to be at all with everyone. But I'm going to bless his family. And he's going to also multiply the earth. And he's going to have a lineage out of his life that is always going to be. But I'm going to give you a promise too. See, God will come up. He will show up in your life, and where you think that there is brokenness and where you think there's things that can't be fixed, God says, no, I'm going to do a renovation in this area of your life. And it's going to be so much better than what it was before. Why? Because that's what God does. He does something with what he sees. So I want to encourage you tonight that God sees you and he knows you. I want you to focus on those promises that God has spoken over your life. Because there's not one detail of your life that God is not aware of. To be honest with you, God is more aware of your life than you know of it, and you probably want to admit. Why? Because he's close to you. Because he is the God that sees you. He's the God that is with you. And so as we progress in this relationship with God, as we move forward in life, guys, this ain't going to get any easier. Life's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. You're going to deal with situations where your immediate need is going to mess up some things. But the one thing that will always remain the same and be consistent is God sees you. He sees you. And he sees you as the way that he's intended for you to be. He doesn't look at you and be like, oh, you're a mistake because you didn't make it. You're a failure because you've not done well. No, God's like, that's my child, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get them where they need to be. And he's going to speak life, and he's going to speak promise, and he's going to speak blessing over every area of your life. Just like we saw Hagar run away and return, know that God is always seeing you no matter where you are. So the best way to kick off this year is for me just to tell you, God sees you. He sees you. He sees your heart. He sees the hardships. He sees the good and he sees the bad. He sees the moments where you rejoice and he sees the moments when you fail. But God sees you and you're not alone in this. And as we just continue in this journey, we will see the faithfulness of God in Abram and Sarah's life, and we will see that God's promise does come forward. But what we will also see is that God's promise in our life will still come forward. That God will progressively continue to do what he does best, and that's being faithful to us, no matter what. Let's bow our heads and close our eyes. You might be in this room tonight. Please, nobody looking around. I just want you to bow your heads, close your eyes. Listen, I know this is a crazy message to come right back into in 2021. You probably were like, hey, we're going to talk about New Year's resolutions, and we're going to talk about new you and blah, blah, blah. No, we're going to talk about that God sees you. He sees you where you're at. He sees you what's going on in your life. And listen, I might not know you. I might not see all the things that you're dealing with, but God sees you, and he loves you, and he has a purpose, and he has a plan for you. You might not be where you want to be, but it's okay because where you are, God is still with you. But tonight you might be struggling. You might be saying, listen, this hit me point blank in my heart. This hit home with me tonight. If it did good, I hope it did. I hope you realize tonight that God sees you where you're at and he has a purpose and a plan for you. I'll be honest, it hits home. This story of the Bible, this hits home with me because this is my story. This is my story. I'm trusting and believing and waiting on the promises of God. So tonight, if it's you and you're in this room, just know that God sees you. And I'm going to pray, and if you want to repeat my prayer, you can. If you want to talk in your groups when we split off, that's fine too. But let's just let God know tonight that, God, I know you see me, and I'm going to let you know that I see you tonight. God, I thank you for each and every person that's in this room. From the new student to the one that's been here for the last 6, 7, 8 years. God, from the one that does not have a relationship with you to the one that loves you so deeply. God, from the one that seems like they have run away from you to the one that's right next to your heart. God, whoever it might be tonight, thank you that you see us where we're at. And God, as you see us where we're at, you want to do something with where we are. And so God, I pray tonight, Lord, that you will allow this message to be deep inside of us, that we can't allow the immediate need to trump the promise that you have. But God, we will remain faithful to what you have called us to. And so, God, I pray tonight that you will bless us, that you'll be with us. God, that you will allow us just to know that you see me. And I thank you for these things, and I pray that they will just be something that will change us. In Jesus' name, amen.